Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online build video with me, Sherman. Today we're going to be taking a look at a new Templar tank build that I came up with. It's one that I've actually played in the past. I've made some modifications to it, changed it, and made it a whole heck of a lot better for dungeon play, I will say. It can be used in trials if you are a skilled two-handed tank player. If you are not, don't attempt it in a trial. First, become comfortable with it before you attempt taking this into trials. Now, it will work in normal trials and some vet trials, but it depends on the group dynamics, it depends on the group makeup, and it depends on if your group wants this kind of tank in it. Now, this is an off tank. This is not a main tank. This is something used as an off tank inside of trials. When it is in dungeons, though, it is a main tank, and it is a very powerful main tank because of the way it works. So it is, like I said, it is a Templar build. Some classes or some races are better options than what I have chosen. The only reason why I chose the Wood Elf race to begin with is the high stamina recovery. For this build, you do need a high stamina recovery, but you also need a decent magicka recovery for it to work properly. So let's go ahead and get in and look at it. So as you guys can see here, this is a Wood Elf Templar. We have a 14,000 magicka with a 30k health, 31k stamina with 64 into stamina for our attribute points. Our magic recovery is 778. Our stamina recovery is 868. Our weapon damage is 2396, and we do have a 41.1% critical. We do need that, and we'll get to that in a minute. Our spell resistance is 22,000. Our physical resistance is 19,422. Don't worry about the resistances a whole lot, because you're going to be using a lot of damage shields to mitigate a lot more damage. But you will be using a buff to buff your resistances as well. So going down the line here, you can see we are using the Lady Munda Stone to give us extra resistances. This helps us keep our resistances at a higher place where it needs to be sufficient in dungeons and off-tanking and trials. Moving down here, we do have Major Savagery through Expert Hunter. And then the last thing we have here is that we are using Tri-Stat Food, and you do want to use Tri-Pots for this build, because Tri-Pots are going to give you all the resources back, and you need that for, especially in trial situations and some like vet DLC dungeon situations, to keep those resources coming in. So moving on to the gear. The gear we're running is, we are running 2 pieces of Swarm Mothers. This is so you can pull trash to you and stuff. In a dungeon scenario, you can pull the trash to you if you have a ranged taunt, which is what you use to taunt anyways. The other 5-piece set we are running is a 5-piece Night Mothers. Now, the reason I chose Night Mothers for this is because they just made an adjustment to Night Mothers in this Summerset update. And it says, when you deal critical damage, you apply major fracture to the enemy, reducing their physical resistance by 5,280 for 6 seconds. The way this build, the two-handed tanking works, you do a lot of light and heavy attacks with damage shields. And it plays off of damage shields. It's kind of like a bubble build, but not really like a really excessive bubble build. You just use a lot of shields to mitigate damage, because you don't use block. Okay? You block certain things, but not everything. So as you can see, we are running a 5-piece Night Mothers, 5 heavy on this build, and 1 medium, 1 light. So this is the medium piece, the helm, the belt is light, and as you can see, we're using reinforced, but Nirnhoned would work better on these 2 pieces. While these 2 are reinforced, this will give you greater resistances. But I didn't have the ability to make this Nirnhoned or this Nirnhoned. So, because I don't have my Nirnhoned traits yet with this crafter, with my main crafter here. The jewelry we're running is a 5-piece Plague Doctors, and I have not upgraded this to gold quality yet. But you will want to upgrade it to gold quality, and you will want to use healthy on all 3. Now, if you are playing a different race, like say a Nord or a Orc or Imperial with this build, you can drop the one of these healthy and go infused on the necklace with a Magicka Recovery enchant. As you can see on the jewelry, we are running 2 weapon damage, 1 magic recovery. The one where you have magic recovery, you want it to be infused, unless you're playing a Wood Elf. If you're playing a Wood Elf, leave it as is. This build also works great for solo play. Alright, moving on down to the to the main weapon and the bow. We are using a 2-handed infused with a hardening enchant. This will keep a damage shield on you almost all the time. Because of the way this works, you have a damage shield that goes off every 5 seconds by the timer of the glyph. But since we're using infused, it's actually 2.5 seconds. Every 2.5 seconds you can get the shield to go off, but it actually calculates it to every 3 seconds. So every 3 seconds you can get the 5k damage shield, which helps you in survivability. I know a lot of people will be like, but doesn't a tank have to use Crusher? A tank does not need to use Crusher in this situation. Like I said, it comes down to group dynamics. You can have one of your DPS run a Crusher enchant. Alright, moving on to the back bar. Now on the back bar, I would suggest also using a hardening enchant, because it's going to give you the uptime of your damage shields much better. But you can also use a weapon spell damage enchant to give you that little bit of burst that you need to make your damage shields from one of your skills a little bit stronger. So as you guys can see here, we have a good amount of weapon damage on the bow. You know, not a whole lot, because the 2-handed is greater in weapon damage by about 200. So you do have this here for back bar kind of AoE trash holding and stuff like that. You can also use a 2-handed weapon back here as well if you want. But I honestly don't advise it. The bow just gives you greater AoE damage and DPS, and it does add to your DPS pool. So, yeah. But yeah, also make sure this is infused. I would suggest starting using hardening before you switch to a weapon damage enchant, and if you like the hardening, stick with it. Don't switch it out. So that's the bow and the 2-handed. That's the weapons. That's the armor and the jewelry. Like I said, 5-piece Plague Doctors. You want to use 2 body pieces with the jewelry, and you want to use the crafted Night Mothers bow and greatsword. The reason you want to use the crafted of this is because of the way Plague Doctor works. When you swap bars, it will drop your health, so for a few seconds, and you don't want to lose that 3,907 health and the 4% healing taken. This kind of build works best on Templars. You can use it on DKs. You can use it on a Sork, because they also have the class damage shields. It does not work well on Nightblades or on Wardens, but it can be done. But you have to use Bone Shield, and Bone Shield uses stamina, so you need a greater stamina pool. So it's better to play like an Imperial race with a Warden, or play the Imperial race with the Nightblade. So you can have that greater stamina pool, so you can use Bone Shield. Bone Shield is going to give you a lot of mitigation as well, but like I said, it costs a lot of stamina. And there's a reason why it works. This build works best with Templar, and we'll get to that in a second. So let's go ahead and head over to the skills. We'll start by going through the passives. Make sure that you unlock all your class passives for your class, no matter what it is. On the weapons and 2-handed, make sure that you unlock all the passives for it and the bow. And you can unlock the sword and shield, because there is going to be times where you might need to switch to a sword and shield on the front bar with a bow on the back bar. It just depends on the situation. If they need you as a main tank, switch to sword and shield. And you can main tank with a sword and shield with this build. It's just I prefer 2-handed. Moving on down to armor, make sure you get all the passives for the different armor types you're wearing. When it comes to world skills, you can be a vampire with this, and you can be a werewolf. I suggest not using the ultimates for it, but use the passives from them. With soul magic, you can use soul summons and soul lock. When it comes to guild skills, make sure you unlock everything in the Fighters Guild. On the Mages Guild, you only need Persuasive Will. You do not need any of the Psijic Order skills for this, but it is good to have the Psijic Order, some of the passives unlocked, and maybe slotting a Psijic Order skill if you feel it's necessary. When it comes to the Undaunted skill line, you will need Inner Beast or Inner Fire. It's up to you which one you choose to use. I prefer Inner Beast because I have a large stamina pool, so I don't mind using a little extra stamina to keep Taunt on me. Make sure you get the passives from Undaunted. Alliance War. Assault skills, you can take Aggressive Warhorn, but you will not be using it that often unless it's on your back bar. Resolving Vigor is a great skill for the Templar, so always make sure you have this on the back bar. We'll get to that in a second. No passives from either of these. Replenishing Barrier is another one I would suggest getting, just for those situations where you need it, where your group's struggling to get by a boss. Maybe having Replenishing Barrier will help your group. What else skills? Make sure you get all the passives or whatever race you're playing. On your crafting, you just really need the alchemy medicinal use. I do not have it on this character yet, but you do want to get this so you can keep potions up. And then on the provisioning, you want to make sure you have Gourmand and Connoisseur to make your foods last longer. Alright, so that is that. Now we're going to go over the bars on the skills on the bar. Starting with the first skill is Wrecking Blow. Now I know a lot of people say, why are you using Wrecking Blow? You're a tank, you don't need to be doing DPS, but that's just it. Even when I'm tanking, it's okay for me to do some DPS. And this is a great ability for that, for me to give some extra DPS to the group, especially in dungeons, because dungeons are a 4-man content, it's not a 12-man raid. So I don't really need to bring like uber tankiness, except for some of the later DLC dungeons, and even in most of them you can get by without that. So, but Wrecking Blow is a really great skill. It does give you Empower, which increases the damage of your next light attack, so whenever you use this, light attack right afterwards. Next up we have Brawler, which is Damage Shield. And you're going to be using this quite a bit, because with the hardening on your weapon, it will apply with Brawler. So you will get 2 damage shields, roughly about a 10k damage shield, which helps mitigate 10k's worth of damage all the time. It does do decent damage, and it does do decent damage over time. We will talk about that in the CP when we get there. Next up, we have Blazing Shield. Now, Blazing Shield is an amazing skill for any Templar tank to use, because of the fact it is based off of your max health and its strength, and 36% when you have the certain CP setup. Nearby enemies increase the strength of the shield by 4%, and then when the shield expires, it explodes. When it explodes, it deals 52% of the damage it absorbed. So you got to think, that's half the damage of what you take. So if you take, or whatever the damage shield is. So if your damage shield is 13,000 or 15,000, and you take that, you cut that in half, that enemy's going to take 7k. It also has a chance of proccing Burning Light, which, as you guys can see, can deal additional physical damage to the enemy, or magic damage, depending on which is higher. But it can deal 4,554 physical damage extra on top of that. This can crit as well, along with this. These both can crit when they go off, so you have a greater chance of applying really good damage with this. Moving on to the next ability, we have Rally. Now, Rally's a good tick heal for you, but it's also a great way to boost your weapon damage for the Brawler skill to increase its damage, the damage shield strength. Because the more weapon damage you have, the more powerful this shield becomes. And I'll go ahead and show you guys what I mean. So there's Rally. And you can see now it went to 2,628. It doesn't go up by much, but it goes up enough that when it goes up to the 100% for each enemy hit, the more trash you're fighting, the more mobs you're fighting, the bigger shields you get from this. And this is why it's a really good ability for a tank to use, because it gives them those greater damage shields. The last ability we have on our bar before we get to our ultimate is Evil Hunter. Now, the reason I use Evil Hunter is to increase my crit. And the reason I increase my crit is because the more critical I do, the more chances I have of applying Night Mother's Gaze Major Fracture. So you have to make this build as a crit build in order for it to work effectively. Moving on to the next ability, we are using Flawless Dawnbreaker, and the reason we're using that is to boost, again, because of the 5% more weapon damage, to boost this. Now you got to remember, I'm also a Templar, so I also get another 6% increase in weapon damage. This is why Templars can make two-handed tanks really, really well, is because they get that increase in weapon damage, and they work really good as two-handed tanks because that weapon damage applies to Brawler. So, Dawnbreaker is also a great ability to apply damage in an AoE cone in front of you, because it hits everything in front of you in a cone at a 10-meter radius. So 10 meters straight in front of you, you hit all the enemies, dealing 10,000 physical damage with 10,000 damage over time. So it's really big. It's a lot. It can be a lot of damage. It's really good for helping clear trash. Now, moving on to the back bar. The back bar has multiple setups. But we're going to go over the one that you're going to use if you're tanking. So if you are tanking in a dungeon, you are going to want to use Inner Beast on the back bar as your first skill. The reason why is because you need a taunt. To be a tank, you have to have a taunt. So this gives you the ability to taunt enemies and get their attention, and then all you have to do is block real quick when they attack you, and you can, especially if they're ranged enemies, block real quick, they'll get pulled to you. It will not pull, Swarm Mothers does not pull bosses. It does not pull certain elite mobs, but it can pull all trash. So it's really a powerful set, and that's why I use the Swarm Mothers with this build. Next up we have Endless Hail. Endless Hail is a really good AoE damage ability. The other ability that you can use from the bow, and this is where I say that you have more options here, is you can use Bombard. Bombard does a conal arrow effect that also reduces enemy movement speed by 6%. So it gives you some CC ability if you want to use it, but it's not necessary. Okay, because the way this build works, it works really well with getting trash pulled to it and then just cleaving it down and helping the group cleave it down. The next ability we have on our bar is Resolving Vigor. This is a massive heal for you and your group. You want to make sure this is maxed out. I haven't had a chance to max out the power of this because I am on PTS. On live, I do have this maxed, but here I do not. Moving on to the next ability, we do have Restoring Focus. This is a great buff for you because you are a mobile tank. That means you do not stand in one place and block. You move from side to side. This is a great skill because you can set it down and you can move from it, move back to it, move from it, move back to it, and you will gain the Major Resolve and Major Ward. And anytime you step out of it, you have 8 seconds to come back to it. So it's a really powerful defensive ability for the Templar. On top of that, you also get Minor Vitality and Minor Protection, increasing healing received by 4 or 8% and reducing damage taken by 8%. This is why it works so well with a two-handed tank. Now, Nords do make better options for this because they get an additional 6% damage reduction, but it becomes an additive damage reduction, so it's not, this one's here, and it's additive, or it's multiplicative, sorry. So it's 6% multiplied in, and it makes it a lot smaller. It's more like a 3% damage reduction, but it still can help in a lot of ways. So, and then again, we also have Evil Hunter on the back bar to increase our crit chance because we want to keep that Night Mother's Gaze Major Fracture up as much as possible. So we want that crit high on both bars. Now, the nice thing about this build is because of the lack of abilities that you do have on your bar, having those lesser abilities, only having 4 per bar, makes it easier to manage your resources as well. Next up, we have Aggressive Warhorn. You are going to keep this up every 30 minutes, as much as you can, every 30 seconds. So every 30 seconds, you're going to want to keep this up when you're in dungeons. When you're out in the regular world or you're going through trash in a dungeon, you do not need Warhorn. You only need Warhorn on boss encounters. And that is that ability. Now, I do want to go over a few things real quick just so people know. The reason you want the Fighters Guild passives is because you want things like Banish the Wicked, where you generate ultimate whenever you kill an undead, danger, or werewolf, because a lot of the dungeons in this game have those kind of enemies. Some of the trials have those kind of enemies, so it's good to have this for ultimate generation. You also want the Slayer passive, which increases your weapon damage by 3% for each Fighters Guild ability slotted. And as you guys can see, right here we're using Evil Hunter and Flawless Dawnbreaker. Now you can change this build up a little if you want to play it as a DPS in a dungeon. And you can play it as a DPS in a dungeon. You just swap out Blazing Shield for Executioner Strike in the two-handed line. And that's all you have to do. Or you can use the class ability, Ajax Spear, Puncturing Strikes, but you want to take the Stamina Morph of this, and you can use that as well. And it's a good way to bring some extra DPS to your group in a dungeon. But that's the only abilities you really need to swap out, unless you want to swap out Vigor on the back bar for Caltrops or something. But everything else, you just want to leave it alone. The other nice thing that's nice about this is when using Rally, it also gives you that Major Brutality for 33 seconds, to where you don't have to use a power pot, like a stamina power pot, to give you that extra weapon damage. And you already have Evil Hunter, so you don't need it for the crit. And you don't want to use a power pot with this build unless you're playing DPS. If you're playing DPS, yes, you can make some more adjustments to give it greater DPS, but you don't really need it. Alright, moving on to the CP. The CP is the standard setup, guys. Things have changed a tiny bit. So we have 44 in the Ironclad. I would suggest changing this, actually. So let me go ahead and make some real quick minor adjustments here. And let me get here. This one, I want to leave that alone. Yep, okay. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take this up as high as you can get it. 58 is what we can do right now, and that is going to give you a 20% damage mitigation from direct damage attacks. Over here, you're going to want to put 23 into Thick Skin. This is going to reduce the damage you take from damage over time effects by 10%. Do not worry, this does also reduce the damage you take on your shields. So it makes it to where your damage over time being applied to on any sort also applies to your shield, so it reduces that damage as well. And it's really nice to have, especially because you don't want your damage shields getting stripped by damage over time. Next, we have Hardy and Elemental Defender, both of these at 43, giving us a 10% damage mitigation from pretty much all damage sources. Over here, we have 16 in Expert Defender. This reduces light and heavy attack damage by 10%. And then we have 56 in the Bastion. This is super important for this build. Because this build plays so much off of damage shields, you want 56 points into here to make your damage shields that much stronger. Next, we have 11 into Quick Recovery. This just gives you a little bit of extra healing received, which helps with Rally. It helps with Vigor. When it's applied to you, because you do have that 8% from heavy armor passive, you have another 8% from minor vitality from your circle, and then you have 4% from Plague Doctors, and then you have this percent here. Now, if you also want, you can trade out Plague Doctors for Ebon Armor if you feel it's necessary, but honestly, I don't think it's necessary with this build setup. Right, moving on to the next tree. We have 23 into Warlord. This reduces break free costs by 10%. We have 16 into Bashing Focus, which reduces bashing by 10%, because as a tank you will bash, so saving those resources and stamina really help. We have 43 into Mooncalf, increasing stamina recovery by 10%. This is the other reason why I chose a Wood Elf. Wood Elves get a 21% stam recovery passively, so it really helps out. Next, we have 43 into Arcanist. This increases magic recovery by 10%. Also helps with our magic recovery. And then we have 43 into Tenaxity, which increases our stamina recovery from our fully charged heavy attacks by 10%. We are wearing 5 pieces of heavy armor, so we get another 25%, and then a baseline of 30. That is a total of 65% return on our heavy attacks. This helps us maintain our stamina really well, because like I said, we're not standing holding block. we are blocking only the essential damage that's going to hurt us the most, and we're still using damage shields to mitigate the rest of it. So you're using damage shields, some blocking to mitigate damage, mostly damage shields. Moving on to the next one, we have 10 into Befoul. This increases the effectiveness of your healing reduction abilities. You're not really using any of these, so you don't necessarily need this. So we're going to go ahead and remove this from here. And we're going to put it just into here. And it's fine. Don't worry if you go over a percentage by a little bit. You know, it's okay to go over a little bit because it's going to give you that a guaranteed 11%. So that's 11% to your reduced dodge roll cost, which saves you resources. The next one is 56 in the Shadow Ward. This reduces our block cost by 20%. This is not really essential, but it's good to have that extra reduced block cost because blocking can cost you a lot because you're not using sword and shield. Moving on to the next tree, we have 43 into Bless. This increases healing done by 10%. This helps you out in the long run with extra survivability, with giving your Vigor some greater healing effect, giving your Rally some greater healing effect. It just kind of helps. Okay, it helps with survivability. Next up, we have 35 into Physical Weapon Expert. This increases your light and heavy attack damage done with two-handed, one-handed sword and shield, dual wield and bow by 20%. This just helps increase your damage. Next, we have 56 in the Master at Arms. This increases damage done with direct damage effects by 20%. Then we have 23 into Shattering Blows, increasing damage done to enemies with damage shields. This isn't really necessary. I only do this because I know there's a lot of bosses in certain encounters that have damage shields. So it's good to have that little bit of extra damage that you can apply to them, and it helps kill them a little bit faster. Moving on to the final tree, we have 43 into Mighty. This increases our physical disease and physical poison and disease damage done by 10%. So this helps out increasing our damage done with our abilities by 10%. Now, here's something I want to show you guys. So you can take a little bit out of here if you want. Take this down to 14 or 15. 15 is really good. And you can take the 23 out of here if you want, and you can disperse it in here to give you a little bit more damage. So you can do something like this if you wanted to. This way, this is going to increase your damage over time. This is going to increase your critical damage, and this is just going to do that. And you can do something like this if you want to. It's up to you. I'm going to go ahead and confirm this and leave it as is. So let's go ahead and go back out here, and I'm going to show you guys just a little bit how this build can work. If you guys haven't seen it, I did play through one of the Dark Ink or the Abysmal Geysers with this build. I've also did some video where I took on a couple world bosses with this build and a few other things. It's not hard. It's a really, like I said, it's a really powerful build, so you can keep your damage shields up pretty much non-stop between Brawler, your Hardening, and this. You can keep them up all the time. With the amount of magic recovery you have, it's enough to keep the magic coming in. So you can use stamina abilities to mitigate damage, or you can use Magicka to mitigate damage through the damage shields. The Magicka damage shield you have, Blazing Shield, is going to be a lot better for you versus the other ones. So just to show you guys a little bit with the tanks to the mobs here. You pretty much can, like I said, keep up the damage shields indefinitely almost. But you do have to watch your resource management while you're in a dungeon. This is the reason why we use tri-pots or Essence of Health pots, is for that greater mitigation or greater return of resources. And I'll just go ahead and show you guys them. So this is an Essence Health pot. As you can see, it gives you back health, Magicka, and stamina, and it also grants you Magicka, stamina, and health recovery by 20%. So this is great for you, because when you do pop one of these, your magic recovery goes to 900, and your stamina recovery goes to 900. Almost 1,000 here and 900 here, which is a good amount of resource return. Also, to show you guys your buffs, when you're buffed up resistance-wise, This is what your resistances look like, 27,000, 24,000. This is more than enough to survive dungeons and stuff, and to also off-tank, because off-tanks don't tank 100% of the time. They only tank what's necessary. So, the other thing that you can do on this build, just so you guys can see, you can go into the Fighters Guild, and when you're just fighting trash, you can throw Silver Leash on your back bar to pull trash, because you don't really need to tank everything. So you can use Silver Leash to pull mobs. This also seems to have a small taunt applied to it. I don't know how effective it is yet, because I haven't tested it in a dungeon scenario or anything, but it does seem to have an aggro mechanic to it that keeps trash on you for just a tiny bit of time. I'm going to guess it's about a 2-second taunt, which is more than enough time for you to do damage and get aggro if necessary. So the other thing you can do is put Silver Leash here and move Inner Beast over here. So you have a few options here. But that is pretty much the Avenger build, guys. I hope you guys like this tank build. I love this build. I've been having a blast with it. I used to two-handed tank back in the day. Now I can actually two-handed tank and do it viably and effectively, which is amazing, especially in dungeons, trials. Not so much. I'm not a big trial runner, so can't really say, but it is something that if you are skilled enough to play, you can use this in a trial as an off tank. Like I said, it takes a little bit of time to get used to, because of the fact that two-handed tanking is around the use of mitigation through damage shields, not so much mitigation through blocking like a sword and shield tank is. So, but that's pretty much it, guys. I hope you guys like this build. If you guys do, you guys can hit that like button. If you guys want to see more build videos by me, or just other videos by me, you can hit that subscribe button as well. Other than that, I want to thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day, and this guy might see you in game. Bye.